The rain whispered secrets against the glass, its steady rhythm filling 14-year-old Sarah with a familiar ache. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing, a truth hidden beneath the endless explanations of her parents' accident. They all said it was the storm, the terrible weather that took them away, but in her heart, Sarah felt a question that refused to quiet. And as she sat in the hollow silence of her grandmother's house, she had no idea that the answers she sought would be found in the eyes of two forgotten creatures she was about to rescue, or that they would change everything she thought she knew. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss any exciting stories like this one. Here, each video is a journey of overcoming an emotion that you won't want to miss. Sarah, a 14-year-old girl with a soft heart and quiet demeanor, sat by the window, watching the rain draw trails down the glass. It had been a few weeks since her parents' tragic accident, yet the memories lingered vividly in her mind. She felt an ache every time she thought of it, the rain on the night they left and the news that followed. Everyone around her had reassured her, it was just the storm. Her grandparents repeated the same words, as if the rain was all there was to blame. Her grandmother, Martha, had taken her in and tried to fill her days with routine and care. Martha was a resilient woman, known for her strength and practicality, always protective but never one for grand expressions of affection. She called Sarah to lunch, her voice as steady and firm as ever. Though Martha meant well, her words often fell short in soothing the turmoil Sarah felt within. Still, Sarah remained silent, often retreating to her thoughts, replaying the night of the accident in her mind. There were too many unanswered questions. Her father had always been a cautious driver, especially in bad weather, which made the story feel incomplete. Her intuition whispered that something else was wrong, that maybe it wasn't the rain alone that had caused it. Each drop of rain reminded her of the unresolved mystery surrounding her parents' death, a loss that left her feeling hollow and restless. It was as though the weather, a simple phenomenon, couldn't hold the full weight of what had happened that night. Sarah's heart ached with the weight of her doubt, which grew stronger with every day that passed. She tried to voice her feelings once, to tell Martha about her lingering suspicions, but her grandmother only sighed, repeating softly that accidents happen and sometimes they're beyond anyone's control. Sarah could tell that Martha wanted her to move forward, to let the past rest, but Sarah couldn't help feeling that something was left unsaid. She was determined to find out what that might be, if only to bring her mind a measure of peace. As Martha left the room, Sarah watched the rain again, feeling a small ember of determination kindling within her. She wasn't sure what she hoped to find, but she knew that she couldn't stay still, trapped in confusion and sadness. So, after lunch, Sarah gathered her courage and walked outside, deciding to follow the forest trail where she often wandered when she needed to think. Perhaps there, in the quiet solitude, she could find a sliver of clarity. With each step, the gentle patter of rain on leaves above was her only companion. Sarah felt an unusual calm wash over her as she walked, but even as the forest embraced her, the gnawing questions remained. Sarah's footsteps carried her deeper into the woods, away from the constant reassurance that her family and neighbors had given her. Each step echoed the quiet determination within her to uncover the truth. The memories of her father's careful driving, her mother's laughter before they left that day, filled her mind as she ventured farther into the forest. The further she went, the more certain she felt that her instincts weren't wrong. She knew the forest trails well, they had always been her refuge. The dense canopy of trees provided her with a sense of comfort and calm, a place where she could be alone with her thoughts. It was here, amidst the rustling leaves and quiet bird songs, that she could listen to her own heart. And her heart insisted there was more to her parents' accident than just bad weather. A part of her felt guilty for questioning the official explanation, as though doubting meant she didn't trust her family's support. But Sarah had always been a perceptive girl, and she knew that something about the story felt incomplete. It wasn't just the loss that hurt her, it was the sense of a puzzle left unsolved. Her father, the same man who would drive slowly through snowstorms, couldn't have lost control so easily. Her grandmother had said that sometimes in life, things just happened without reason, and maybe she was right. But Sarah needed more than just happened to find peace. She needed answers, and the urge to uncover the truth outweighed her fear of disappointment or conflict. She began to wonder if others would understand her need to investigate, or if they would see it as unnecessary pain. The afternoon wore on as she walked, rain occasionally dripping from the branches overhead, soaking her hair and shoulders. Yet she barely noticed, too absorbed in her thoughts. She tried to recall every detail of the last time she had seen her parents, searching for anything that might explain the accident. The rain, the road, the curve, all had been pointed out by the police, but there was still that haunting feeling of something missing. Suddenly, she stopped. There, in the quiet of the forest, with raindrops sliding down her face like tears, Sarah made up her mind. If no one else would investigate, she would. As Sarah walked, the forest began to thin, revealing the familiar outline of a narrow path she had often taken before. Lost in thought, she nearly missed the slight rustle from the bushes beside her. Stopping abruptly, she squinted into the dim undergrowth, her heart racing. Gradually, two shapes became visible, a mother dog, frail and dirty, and her small, trembling puppy beside her. Both looked exhausted, clearly struggling to find shelter from the rain. Instinctively, Sarah knelt down and called to them softly. The mother dog's dark, sad eyes met hers, filled with a depth of emotion that surprised Sarah. She saw fear, fatigue, and a hint of trust as the dog didn't try to run. The puppy whimpered, pressing close to its mother as though sensing her uncertainty. Sarah's heart melted. She knew she couldn't leave them there, exposed and vulnerable. Moving slowly to avoid frightening them, Sarah extended her hand toward the mother dog. She felt a pang of sympathy seeing the dried blood matting the fur around her neck and the visible weight of exhaustion in her heavy breathing. Despite the fear she must have felt, the dog allowed Sarah to pet her gently, a tiny wag of her tail giving Sarah hope. "I'll take care of you," she murmured, her voice soft but firm. It was a decision as instinctive as breathing, a chance to help when she felt so helpless about her own grief. Gathering the shivering puppy in her arms, she carefully lifted the mother dog, her small frame struggling with the weight but determined to bring them to safety. With each step homeward, Sarah grew more resolute, her thoughts shifting from sorrow to purpose. The dogs were her responsibility now, and taking care of them filled a piece of the void left by her parents' sudden absence. She knew Martha wouldn't be thrilled, but this felt right. It was something she could actually control. Arriving home, Sarah found her grandmother waiting, her face a blend of concern and astonishment. "Sarah, what on earth?" Martha's gaze shifted from Sarah to the bedraggled dogs, eyebrows lifting in disapproval. Yet as Sarah gently set them down and explained their plight, Martha sighed and nodded, her eyes softening. "All right," she said reluctantly. "But you'll be responsible for them." With that small approval, Sarah felt a warmth she hadn't felt in weeks. She thanked her grandmother and settled the dogs into a makeshift bed by the fireplace. That night, for the first time since her parents' death, Sarah slept with a light heart. The days that followed brought a quiet but significant shift in Sarah's world. She woke early each morning to feed the dogs, whom she named Daisy and Scout, after characters from her favorite book. She carefully cleaned Daisy's wounds and spoke to her softly, creating a gentle routine that seemed to soothe both of them. As Daisy grew stronger, so did Sarah's spirit, and Scout, the little puppy, soon followed Sarah everywhere with boundless energy. Her grandmother watched quietly from a distance, noticing the changes in her granddaughter. Sarah seemed more focused, less consumed by the shadows of loss. Though Martha had been hesitant about the dogs initially, she saw now how they had given Sarah something precious, a reason to wake up each day, a distraction from the grief. Martha even allowed herself a small smile when Scout playfully tugged at her shoelaces, filling the house with warmth and life. Gradually, Daisy began to trust Sarah completely, her eyes reflecting a loyalty Sarah hadn't anticipated. It was as if Daisy understood the pain she carried, offering silent companionship whenever Sarah sat with her, petting her fur in moments of stillness. Taking care of Daisy and Scout became Sarah's quiet joy, giving her a sense of purpose she had been desperate for since the accident. Their bond deepened with each passing day, and soon even Martha found herself drawn to the animals' presence. She hadn't wanted the dogs around at first, but seeing Sarah's brighter spirit softened her heart. Occasionally, Martha would pet Daisy's head or slip Scout a treat, gestures that didn't go unnoticed by Sarah, who silently appreciated her grandmother's subtle warmth. For the first time, Sarah found herself looking forward to each day. The heavy grief hadn't disappeared, but it became easier to bear as she focused on Daisy and Scout. She felt their loyalty like an invisible thread, binding them all together in shared solace. Her heart began to heal, bit by bit, through the daily acts of care and kindness she offered to her new friends. As weeks turned into months, the house filled with laughter and movement again. Scout's endless curiosity brought countless small adventures, while Daisy's gentle, calming presence filled the quiet corners of Sarah's mind. And with this companionship came a renewed sense of hope, something Sarah hadn't dared to feel in what felt like ages. But with that hope also came the lingering questions about her parents' accident, which continued to haunt her on quiet nights. One afternoon, the peace of their routine was interrupted by a knock on the door. Sarah opened it to find Officer Hale, who had come with news about her parents' accident. In his hand, he held a small device, explaining that it was a recording recovered from her parents' car. They had managed to salvage some footage from the night of the crash. Sarah's hands trembled as Officer Hale set up the device. She and Martha sat side by side, their breaths held in anticipation. As the video played, Sarah's heart raced. The footage was grainy, damaged by the impact, but gradually, the details emerged. She saw the dark, rain-soaked road, the headlights illuminating the slick surface as her father carefully drove through the storm. Then, out of nowhere, two small, shadowy figures darted across the road. Sarah's father swerved suddenly to avoid them, the wheel jerking left, then right. In those last moments, Sarah could almost feel the terror in the car as it veered dangerously off course. The screen went dark, and the video ended, leaving the room in silence. Martha's hand found Sarah's, squeezing it tightly as they both struggled to process what they had seen. Sarah's mind spun, filled with a mixture of disbelief, shock, and grief. Her heart sank as she realized the truth. The animals her parents had swerved to avoid that night were very likely Daisy and Scout. The revelation felt like a cold wave crashing over her, bringing a flood of emotions that threatened to drown her. Daisy and Scout, the very creatures she had rescued, had been at the heart of the tragedy she was trying to understand. It was a twist of fate that felt cruel and incomprehensible, tearing open the wound she had worked so hard to heal. Unable to speak, Sarah left the room, her mind racing as she grappled with this new reality. It was as if the bond she had forged with the dogs was suddenly tainted, an unwelcome reminder of her parents' absence. She felt an overwhelming urge to distance herself, to hide from the painful truth that had shattered her peace. Overwhelmed by the revelation, Sarah struggled to maintain the bond she had formed with Daisy and Scout. Every time she looked at them, flashes of the accident replayed in her mind, filling her with a sense of betrayal that she couldn't shake. The connection that had brought her so much comfort now became a painful reminder of her parents' death. She avoided them, staying silent and withdrawn, and the once warm home grew quiet and tense again. Daisy and Scout sensed the change immediately. The mother dog, once eager to be by Sarah's side, began to linger near the corners, watching her with a distant sadness. Scout, once playful and full of energy, followed suit, his small frame moving cautiously around the house. Martha noticed the shift and tried to console Sarah, but her granddaughter remained quiet, her grief too raw and tangled for words. Martha herself had grown fond of the dogs and tried to remind Sarah that the accident had been just that, an accident. She told her that Daisy and Scout were innocent, acting on instinct, and hadn't caused the tragedy on purpose. But Sarah's heart was closed to reason. The pain she felt seemed too heavy, leaving no room for the compassion that had once come so easily to her. Every glance toward Daisy reminded her of the night of the crash, filling her with anger and sorrow. Sarah wished she could forgive, could go back to the days when caring for them brought her a sense of purpose. But guilt twisted inside her, hardening her heart against them. How could she love them, knowing what she now knew? Days passed, and the silence deepened. Sarah avoided even calling their names, her once gentle and loving touch now replaced by an empty gaze. The weight of her grief left her feeling hollow, and she struggled to find peace. The dogs no longer approached her, sensing the invisible wall between them. Her heart felt like it was breaking anew, but she was too lost in her pain to see a way out. As winter drew near, Martha grew more worried, but she respected Sarah's need to process her grief alone. She hoped that, with time, her granddaughter would find it in herself to heal. But Sarah's heart remained bound in sorrow, isolated from the love and warmth that had once filled her days with Daisy and Scout. She wondered if the family she had created with them was forever broken. One bitterly cold night, a heavy snowfall covered the town. Sarah lay awake in her room, her mind restless with thoughts she couldn't escape. She tossed and turned until, suddenly, she realized she hadn't heard Daisy or Scout all night. A pang of fear gripped her heart, and she rushed downstairs, only to find their usual sleeping spot empty. Panic surged through her as she called their names, but the house was silent. Without thinking, Sarah threw on her coat and ran out into the freezing night, her breath visible in the icy air as she frantically searched for them. The snow had blanketed everything, and her calls were lost in the wind. Her heart pounded as she wandered through the town's quiet streets, desperate to find them before it was too late. The pain of their absence hit her harder than she expected. She couldn't bear the thought of losing them too. Finally, beneath a frost-covered sign, she saw them. Daisy and Scout were huddled together, shivering from the cold but too afraid to approach her. Seeing their small, trembling bodies broke the final barrier around her heart. She fell to her knees, her tears mingling with the snow as she whispered, "I'm so sorry. Please forgive me." Slowly, Daisy approached her, her eyes soft and forgiving. Scout followed, his small tail wagging timidly. Sarah gathered them into her arms, feeling the warmth of their fur against her cold skin. In that moment, she knew she could never let them go. The love she felt for them ran deeper than the pain, deeper than the grief. She realized that the bond they shared was strong enough to heal them all. As they sat there in the snow, huddled close, Sarah felt a peace she hadn't known in a long time. The burden of her sorrow began to ease, and she realized she didn't need to blame them for her loss. She needed them to help her carry it. With the snow gently falling around them, Sarah's heart began to thaw, rekindling the trust and love she had nearly lost. Together, they walked back home under the quiet winter sky. The pain of her parents' death would always be there, but now, so would the healing presence of Daisy and Scout. They were her family, and she finally understood that they were meant to face this journey together. In the days that followed, a new lightness filled the house. Sarah returned to her routine with Daisy and Scout, caring for them and allowing herself to fully feel the love they offered. She still missed her parents deeply, but the grief no longer consumed her. Instead, she learned to find solace in the small moments, Scout's playful antics, Daisy's gentle gaze, each a reminder that she wasn't alone. Martha noticed the change in Sarah and silently celebrated, feeling as though she had regained her granddaughter in a way she feared might never happen. Daisy and Scout had given Sarah back a piece of herself that she had lost, and Martha grew to appreciate them in her own quiet way. She even began slipping them treats under the table, a small act of acceptance and gratitude. In time, Sarah found herself laughing again, a sound that had been absent since her parents' passing. Scout, with his boundless energy, lifted her spirits on difficult days, while Daisy remained a steady presence by her side, as if keeping watch over her healing heart. Their companionship was a constant, a gift Sarah hadn't fully realized until now. Martha, too, softened in her approach. She no longer saw the dogs as a burden, understanding instead that they had been essential in Sarah's journey to peace. She found herself embracing their place in the family, grateful for the change they had brought to their lives. Martha even shared a few gentle smiles with Daisy, acknowledging the bond they all shared. The dark clouds of grief that had once weighed so heavily on Sarah began to part, replaced by a quiet resilience. She found strength in knowing that, though she couldn't change the past, she could honor it by allowing herself to move forward. The love she felt for Daisy and Scout became part of her healing, a daily reminder that life could continue, even in the wake of loss. As winter turned to spring, the world seemed to mirror Sarah's inner transformation. The cold and sorrow of the past months slowly gave way to new beginnings. With each passing day, she found new memories to cherish, new joys to experience alongside her furry friends. They had been her salvation, helping her through her darkest days, and now they were part of the life she was rebuilding. Sarah knew the journey wasn't over, but she no longer feared the road ahead. With Daisy and Scout by her side, she was ready to embrace the future, one step at a time. If you liked this story and want more content like this, leave a like, share it with someone you know will be moved by it, and of course, subscribe to the channel. Together, we will explore inspiring stories and moments that touch the heart. Until the next video.